Imagine this. You've paid your HOA dues on time for years. Shoveled snow off your elderly neighbour's walk. Even helped plant flowers around the community sign. Then one morning, you get a letter saying the very thing that makes your house a home, a handmade porch. A swing where your kids grew up, or a boathouse your father built has to be torn down in 30 days. And if you don't comply, $100 a day, every day, until you give in. That's how my fight began. My name is Thomas Grant, though everyone around Maplewood Shores just calls me Tom. I'm 55, a retired firefighter, husband to Linda, father of 2 grown kids. For as long as I can remember, my life has been wrapped around the lake at the centre of our town. The jewel of our property wasn't the house itself, it was the boathouse my dad built in 1965. White clapboard siding, red trim, shingles, weathered grey. Inside hung oars, worn smooth, life vests from decades of summers, and photos taped to the wall of kids with their first catch. That boathouse wasn't just storage, it was a museum of our lives. For decades, Maplewood Shores was the kind of place you bragged about. Folks waved when you drove by. Potlucks happened every summer. Kids ran barefoot until the fireflies came out. We had rules. Sure, keep your dog leashed, mow your lawn, don't leave trash by the beach, but they were neighbourly rules. They felt like common sense. Then the HOA modernised. That's when everything went sideways. It started with a man named Richard, early 50s, sharp haircut, suit even on weekends. He moved in from the city, bought the biggest house on the ridge, and immediately ran for HOA president. With a smile like a salesman and a voice like he was always closing a deal, he convinced enough folks that standards were the key to higher property values. Soon, we weren't just neighbours, we were members. And with membership came inspections, warnings, and fines. At first it was silly stuff, grass half an inch too long, Christmas lights left up past January, a truck parked in the driveway instead of the garage. People grumbled, but most paid. That's how they get you, by making it easier to cave and to resist. Then one May morning, I got the letter, structure identified, non-compliant boathouse, findings unapproved, exterior materials, non-conforming paint scheme, aesthetic inconsistency with Maplewood Shores guidelines. Directive remove or replace within 30 days. Penalty for non-compliance, $100 per day. I read it 3 times. My hands shaking. Remove my father's boathouse, the place where my kids learned to tie knots, where Linda and I painted trim together on our first summer as homeowners, where my dad carved Grant family, 1,965 into the beam. No, absolutely not. I marched to the next HOA meeting, letter in hand. Richard sat at the head of the table, flanked by board members who nodded at every word he spoke. This boathouse predates the HOA. I said, laying down old photos and county permits. It was built legally, maintained faithfully, and it's part of this lake's history. Richard gave me that politician's smile. We appreciate your attachment, Tom, but the board has voted the structure is inconsistent with the community's curated aesthetic. Removal is mandatory. Curated aesthetic, I snapped. This isn't a shopping mall, it's our home. He banged the gavel. Decision final. I walked out shaking, fury burning in my chest. That night, Linda found me sitting by the boathouse, staring at the reflection of the red trim in the water. You're not really thinking of tearing it down. Are you? She asked softly. Not in a million years. I muttered. If they want to fight, they've got one. What came next was months of harassment. Notices about improperly stored equipment because I left a canoe upside down on the grass. Fines for a non-approved flagpole. Warnings about wood stacked too close to the property line. It was clear Richard was trying to bury me in paper until I broke. But he didn't know me. I'd run into burning buildings. I wasn't about to surrender to a man with a clipboard. The harassment didn't just stop at letters. It was like living under a magnifying glass, with Richard holding it steady, waiting to burn me. One morning, I found a bright orange sticker slapped onto my mailbox, violation non-compliant colour. I stared at it in disbelief. The mailbox had been there for 20 years. Painted a simple dark green. Now apparently it was a crime against the aesthetic. The same week, Linda got pulled aside at the grocery store. A neighbour whispered, Richard's been saying, you two are difficult, that you're dangerous for property values. My wife came home furious. Dangerous Tom, all we've ever done is mow the lawn and pay our bills. It wasn't just an attack on our house. It was an attack on our reputation. That's when I realised this wasn't only about me. I started talking to neighbours, quietly at first. Walt, who lived 2 houses down, confessed that he'd been fined for having his American flag mounted at the wrong angle. Miss Evelyn, 80 years old, had been warned that her bird bath attracted pests. The Petersons got dinged because their kids left bicycles on the driveway overnight. Everyone had a story, and everyone was tired. You know what this is? Walt growled one evening as we sat on my porch with beers. It's not about safety. It's control. He wants to prove he owns us. I nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time we remind him this neighbourhood isn't his kingdom. The first real turning point came in July. I'd spent weeks digging through county records. Same as I used to sift through case reports at the firehouse. And there it was, a 1965 building permit for the Boathouse, signed by the county inspector. Even better, tucked in the bylaws of Maplewood Shores itself, I found a clause. Legacy structures predating the HOA shall be exempt from aesthetic uniformity requirements, provided they are maintained in safe condition. I nearly laughed when I read it. Richard had written me up under his own rules, without bothering to read the fine print. I made copies of everything, slid them into my growing binder, and brought it to the next meeting. When my turn came, I laid the papers flat on the table. Here's the permit. Here's the clause in your own bylaws. This boathouse is exempt. Legally, you have no authority to remove it. The room went still. Neighbours craned their necks to look. Richard's smile faltered for just a second before he snapped. This matter has been reviewed by a licensed inspector who deems the structure unsafe. Licensed inspector, I shot back. You mean your cousin, Greg, the one who got his license 6 months ago and whose business card doesn't even list an office address? Gasps rippled across the room. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Richard slammed the gavel. Discussion closed. But the damage was done. Folks had seen his bluff. That night, walking back from the meeting, Linda slipped her arm through mine. You rattled him. She whispered, good. I muttered, he needed rattling. The next week, things escalated. Someone dumped a pile of broken pallets and brush right in front of my boathouse. 2 days later, I got a violation notice, property not maintained. Debris present. I checked my security camera, and sure enough, the footage showed a pickup backing in at midnight. And behind the wheel, Stan, the HOA treasurer, one of Richard's closest allies. I drove the footage straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Collins shook his head as he watched. Looks like they're setting you up. Tom, we'll have a word with him. The notice disappeared quietly, but word got around. Neighbours saw what was happening and they didn't like it. By August, small grumbles had grown into open anger. Evelyn stopped me on the path one morning. Tom, we don't have to take this. If we can sign enough names, we can recall him. Can't we? Yes, I said slowly. We can. That night, on my porch with Walt and Linda, I laid it out. We need 51% of homeowners' signatures. If we get them, we can force a recall election. Walt cracked a grin. Then let's get to work. And just like that, the quiet resistance began. We started knocking on doors, binder in hand. I showed neighbours the permit, the bylaws. The video of Stan, people shook their heads, muttered curses, and signed. Some were scared. What if Richard retaliates, they asked. He already is. I told them, but he can't retaliate against all of us. By the end of the month, we had the numbers, enough to call for a recall election. When the petition was submitted, Richard's face at the next meeting was priceless tight, pale, furious. This is illegitimate, he barked. Outside agitators have poisoned this community. Outside agitators. Walt barked back. We are this community. The room erupted in cheers. For the first time, Richard looked less like a king and more like a man, cornered. The recall election date was set for late September. Word spread like wildfire through Maplewood shores. Some folks were nervous, others excited, but everyone knew this was the showdown. The weeks leading up to it were pure tension. Richard doubled down. He sent glossy flyers in the mail, filled with stock photos of smiling families and phrases like protect our property values, support stability, not chaos. He painted me as the agitator who wanted to destroy community harmony. Neighbours started forwarding me the emails he blasted out. To one individual has repeatedly endangered the safety and aesthetics of Maplewood Shores. Do not let reckless behaviour dictate our future. Reading that made my blood boil. Reckless. My family had built half the traditions on this lake. Linda caught me pacing the living room one night, fists clenched. Tom, she said gently, don't let him get in your head. People know you. They've shared dinners with you, borrowed tools from you. They know who you really are. She was right, but the fear still gnawed at me. What if folks believed him? Meanwhile, the intimidation ramped up. One evening, Walt found a violation notice taped to his door, unapproved fence height. He didn't even have a fence. Another family, the Petersons, woke up to find their mailbox knocked over. The next day, they received a warning about mailbox damage lowering community appeal. It was so obvious Richard and his allies were trying to scare people out of voting. But something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking us, it hardened us. Neighbours began talking openly in the streets, something they hadn't done in months. Evelyn declared, if Richard wants to fine me for my bird bath again, he can come and carry it out himself. I'll be waiting with lemonade. People laughed, and laughter was like a spark in the dark. The night before the election, I couldn't sleep. I walked down to the Boathouse, lantern in hand. The red trim glowed in the flickering light, and the water lapped gently against the planks. I ran my hand along the beam where my dad had carved Grant family. Etienne Jobe Lochewu. The grooves were worn but still strong. "Dad," I whispered, "I'm doing this for you, for everyone. Help me hold steady tomorrow." The boards creaked beneath me. The same familiar sound I'd grown up with. Somehow, it felt like an answer. Election day came hot and bright. The community centre was packed. Neighbours lined up with ballots in hand. The rules required a secret vote, with volunteers, none of them board members, counting the papers. People filed past me, some squeezing my shoulder, others giving small nods. A few avoided my eyes. But that was fine. I didn't need unanimous. I just needed enough. Richard sat in the front row, jaw tight. His lawyer perched beside him like a watchdog. When the last ballot dropped into the box, the volunteers carried it to a side table. The room went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. 1, 2, 3. They counted aloud. Each paper lifted carefully. Finally, the lead volunteer cleared her throat. In favour of recall 79, against 23. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the room erupted, cheers, clapping, even tears. Walt slapped my back so hard I nearly dropped my binder. Evelyn actually whooped, her cane thumping the floor like a drum. Richard's face turned crimson. He stood, pointed a finger at me, and snarled, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." Then he stormed out, his lawyer scrambling behind him. That night, Linda and I sat by the boathouse, listening to crickets sing across the water. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it." I corrected, but deep down, I knew she was right about something else too. It wasn't over. Not with a man as prideful as Richard. He'd lost the crown, but I had no doubt he'd keep swinging. October came in with the smell of damp leaves and wood smoke. On the surface, Maplewood Shores looked calm again. The recall had shaken people awake, and neighbours finally walked around without flinching at every passing SUV. But under the surface, I knew Richard wasn't finished. 2 weeks after the election, I got served papers at the front door. A civil lawsuit. He was suing me personally for defamation and emotional damages. Linda read the first page and nearly laughed. "Defamation, Tom? All you did was read his own bylaws back to him." Still, the weight of that stack of papers sat heavy in my hands. A lawsuit wasn't just ink on a page, it meant court dates, lawyer fees, time, stress. I called Rebecca, the attorney who'd been advising us through the recall. She flipped through the documents, chuckled, and said, "This is hot air. I'll file a motion to dismiss." Sure enough, a judge tossed the case within 10 minutes of the first hearing. No evidence. She said flatly, "Dismissed with prejudice." It should have felt like a victory. But walking out of the courthouse, binder under my arm, I muttered to Linda, "He's just trying to wear me down." She squeezed my hand, then "Don't let him." The harassment shifted gears. Fake social media accounts popped up, posting photos of my property with captions like "Unsafe eyesore threatens kids" and "Why won't the board protect our values?" The accounts praised Richard as a visionary leader. Real subtle. At first, it stung. My daughter called from out of state, worried. "Dad," I saw posts saying, "The boathouse is about to collapse. Are you okay?" I reassured her, but inside I burned. Lies spread faster than truth. And Richard knew it. Then one night in November, my security camera pinged. 2 figures in hoodies crept along the shoreline, cordless saw in hand. My heart nearly stopped. I grabbed a flashlight, stormed outside, and shouted, "Hey!" They froze, then bolted, dropping the saw into the mud. The camera caught their truck as they sped off license plate, clear as day. Deputy Collins traced the plate back to a landscaping company, the same one Richard hired regularly. Charges were filed against the two men for attempted vandalism. Richard denied knowing anything, but everyone in town put the pieces together. Suddenly, his smear campaign flipped. Instead of believing his lies, neighbours saw him for what? He was a man willing to sabotage a family's history just to prove a point. Meanwhile, the new board was busy undoing the mess he left behind. They froze all fines until reviewed, audited the budget, and uncovered consulting fees funneled to Richard's relatives. People gasped at the numbers, thousands of dollars that should have gone to road repairs and community upkeep. Carla, the new chairwoman, stood at the December meeting and said, "We're done with fear. From now on, this HOA works for its members, not against them." The applause shook the walls. They also passed a resolution formally protecting legacy structures. For the first time in black and white, my father's boathouse was recognised as a heritage landmark. When they unveiled the little bronze plaque, Grant Boathouse, established 1965. I had to step back and wipe my eyes. Linda leaned against me and whispered, "He'd be proud." Tom. But like I said before, bullies don't go quietly. In January, I found the lock at the dam cut clean through. Someone had tried to tamper with the water level. If they'd succeeded, half the shoreline could have flooded, and the boathouse might have been washed away. Deputy Collins studied the chain with a grim face. This isn't mischief. This is sabotage. It didn't take long before payment records traced back straight to Richard's personal account. By February, he was formally charged. Not jail time, folks, like him rarely see the inside of a cell, but hefty fines and a court order barring him from ever serving on any HOA board again. When news spread through Maplewood Shores, people didn't cheer. They sighed like a storm had finally passed. That spring, the boathouse became more than just mine. Families visited to take photos. Kids fished off the dock beside it. One young man even asked if he could propose to his girlfriend inside, among the oars and old life vests. Go ahead. I said, smiling, that's what this place is for. Looking back, I realised the fight wasn't really about wood and nails. It was about something bigger, proving that no HOA, no board, no curated aesthetic gets to erase our history. And if I had to do it again, I would, every late night, every letter, every fight. Because a house is just lumber, but a home that's memory. And memory is worth fighting for. Spring sunlight came soft and golden that year. The kind that makes the lake shimmer like it's breathing again after a long winter. For the first time in months, I walked out to the boathouse without that knot in my stomach, without scanning the shoreline for trouble. The air smelled of pine and thawed earth. And for a moment, everything felt the way it used to, but the scars of the fight lingered. Every creak of the board still made me wonder who else might try something. Linda teased me for double-checking the locks every night, but I couldn't help it. When you've been under siege, peace feels almost suspicious. The new HOA board threw themselves into rebuilding trust. Carla set up monthly community coffees in the firehouse hall, no gavel, no speeches, just neighbours sitting together with donuts and talking. Folks brought up potholes. noisy boats, even plans for a summer block party. Instead of threats, there were solutions. Instead of fear, there was laughter. I remember one morning, Evelyn raised her hand and said, "I'd like to see a bench by the trail near the water. My knees ain't what they used to be, and I'd like a place to rest." Instead of fining her for pest-attracting bird baths, the board voted on the spot to buy 2 benches. A week later, Walt and I helped install them. Evelyn cried when she sat down for the first time. "This," she said softly, "is how it should have always been." Meanwhile, the boathouse was turning into a landmark. The Historical Society sent a photographer to capture it for their archives. Kids painted rocks and lined them along the path leading to its door. A young couple asked if they could hold their wedding photos there. Standing in the doorway, I realised the fight had transformed the old building. It wasn't just the Grant Boathouse anymore. It belonged to Maplewood Shores, a place where memories layered over each other like coats of paint. By June, Carla and the board launched something new, Heritage Day. The idea was simple: celebrate the history of the lake instead of pretending it never existed. Families brought old photo albums. Dads grilled burgers. Kids ran races across the grass. At sunset, we all gathered by the water. Carla gave a short speech, then handed me the microphone. I don't usually like speaking in front of crowds, but I looked at all those faces, neighbours who'd stood beside me, who'd signed petitions, who'd risked Richard's wrath, and I found the words, "This boathouse isn't just mine." I said, "It's ours." A reminder that when someone tries to erase our history, we can stand up and say, "Not here, not now, not ever." The applause rolled across the water like thunder. Of course, peace doesn't mean life stops testing you. In late July, a glossy packet arrived in the mail. A developer, some outfit from Chicago, wanted to buy land on the far side of the lake to build a luxury resort. The brochure showed fake families in matching swimsuits, smiling on docks that looked nothing like ours. At the next community meeting, the tension was thick. Nobody wanted another Richard-style battle, but nobody wanted to lose what we'd fought so hard to protect. We've been through this before. Walt said, standing tall, "We know the playbook now. We stick together, we push back, and we remind them this lake isn't for sale." Heads nodded around the room, and for the first time, I realised something important. Richard's tyranny had been awful, but it had forged us into a family. We weren't just neighbours anymore. We were a community with a backbone. That night, I sat in the boathouse, lantern flickering against the old beams. I traced the carved words Grant family, 1965, with my fingers. My father's mark, Dad. I whispered, "We're still here, and we're stronger than ever." The wood felt warm under my hand, as if it remembered. But let me ask you this: what would you do if your HOA demanded you erase the very thing that tied your family to your home? Would you bow your head and comply, or would you fight, even when the odds stacked against you? Because I'll tell you, fighting isn't easy, but surrendering who you are, that's harder still. August came in hot. The kind of sticky heat that makes shirts cling and tempers short. But despite the weather, Maplewood Shores felt lighter than it had in years. Neighbours actually waved at each other again. Kids splashed in the lake without parents glaring over their shoulders for fear of a violation. Carla and the board announced the first summer lakeside festival. Booths lined the grassy common area barbecue, homemade lemonade, local crafts. A bluegrass band played on a flatbed trailer. For the first time in decades, people were celebrating, not hiding, and front and centre, decorated with bunting and flowers, stood the old boathouse. Kids painted wooden fish and hung them on the door like ornaments. Someone even brought a big poster that read, "Not just a boathouse, our history." I stood back, arms crossed, fighting a lump in my throat. Linda slipped her hand into mine. "See, Tom, it's bigger than us now." But, like always, peace had shadows. One evening after the festival, I got a call from Deputy Collins. "Tom, just wanted you to know Richard's lawyer tried to file another complaint with the county about your boathouse. Same claims, same nonsense." I groaned and dismissed immediately. He said with a chuckle, "The judge barely skimmed it before tossing it out. But I figured you'd want to hear it from me first." Part of me wanted to slam the phone down, but another part just laughed. The man was hundreds of miles away now, yet still obsessed with tearing me down. If nothing else, it showed how powerless he'd become. Meanwhile, the new board kept building momentum. They launched a tool share program. Instead of fining someone for an old shed, neighbours could borrow equipment to fix things. They started a scholarship fund for kids heading to college, funded partly by what used to be violation revenue. It was almost funny. Richard had preached that stricter rules would protect property values. But it turned out kindness, cooperation, and community spirit did more for our homes than threats ever had. Houses sold quicker. Newcomers arrived, already smiling. And for the first time, Maplewood Shores felt like a place people bragged about again. The boathouse itself gained recognition beyond our town. A regional magazine ran a feature called "The Boathouse That Beat the HOA." Photographers came out, snapping shots of its weathered siding and red trim, and they interviewed Linda and me, but also kids fishing, teenagers skipping rocks, and Evelyn, who declared proudly, "This place outlasted the nonsense. It'll outlast all of us too." Reading that article, I realised our fight had given other folks hope. Letters started arriving, people from other states, other neighbourhoods, trapped under the thumbs of their own HOAs. One man wrote, "They fined me for my tomato garden. After reading your story, I gathered my neighbours. We're starting a petition." I sat at the kitchen table, letter in hand, and whispered, "Good for you." By fall, the boathouse wasn't just a building. It was a beacon. The county approved its nomination for the state's historic registry. Officials showed up with clipboards and cameras, documenting every beam. When the certificate finally arrived in the mail, stamped, sealed, official, I laid it flat on the kitchen table. Linda and I stared at it in silence before she said, "Your dad would be grinning ear to ear." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. And then, one crisp October evening, something happened that sealed everything for me. A young boy, maybe 10, approached while I was sitting on the dock. He shuffled his feet. Nervous. "Mr. Grant," he asked. "Yeah." "Son, my grandpa says this boathouse is special. Is it true?" I smiled, patting the step beside me. "It's special because of the people who've lived with it. My dad built it. My kids grew up around it. And now it's part of your story too." He nodded seriously, as if I'd handed him a secret. Then he ran off to join his friends. Laughter echoing across the water. I sat there long after the sunset painting the lake in fire, and thought, this is why we fought. Not for wood, not for nails, for memory, for belonging. So let me ask you, what would you do if your HOA came after something like this? Not just a shed or a mailbox, but the heartbeat of your family story. Would you roll over, or would you fight like hell? Even when it felt impossible, because I'll tell you, I fought. And looking back, it was the only choice I could have lived with. Winter came early that year. By late November, frost coated the pines like powdered sugar, and the lake froze in silver sheets that creaked under the weight of kids daring each other to skate farther out. Life in Maplewood Shores slowed to the rhythm of shoveling snow, lighting fires, and warming hands on mugs of cocoa. But even in the cold, the sense of togetherness held strong. The board launched the first Winter Lights gathering. Families strung lanterns along the trail that led to the boathouse. And neighbours gathered with crockpots of chili and trays of cookies. Music drifted from a fiddle. Boots stomped on the icy ground, and laughter rolled through the crisp air. At sunset, everyone crowded onto the dock, breath puffing into clouds. As the lanterns reflected in the frozen water, Carla spoke first a year ago. This community lived in fear. Tonight, we live in light. She handed me the microphone. My throat tightened, but I spoke anyway. This old boathouse isn't just lumber. It's memory. It's proof that when people stand together, no bully, no, fine, no threat can take away what we love. The crowd erupted into cheers. Even Evelyn, wrapped in 3 scarves, waved her cane like a victory flag. But memory has weight. And one night I found myself alone in the boathouse. Fire crackling in the old stove. I pulled out a weathered photo album from the shelf, pictures taped up decades ago. My dad, shirtless and sunburnt, hammer in hand. Linda, holding our baby daughter on the dock. Me, grinning awkwardly with a fish that was probably smaller than I bragged. I traced the edges of those photos with calloused fingers and whispered, we kept it safe. For the first time, the knot in my chest loosened completely. The new year brought something unexpected. Visitors, folks from outside Maplewood Shores who'd read the magazine article, started driving out to see the boathouse that beat the HOA. Some asked for photos. Some just wanted to hear the story. At first it felt strange, almost invasive, but then I realised they weren't gawking. They were gathering strength. They wanted proof that it could be done. One woman, eyes tired, told me they fined me $500 for hanging a wind chime. My husband said fighting was hopeless. But after hearing your story, we're not giving up. I clasped her hand. Don't. They only win if you quit. By March, the county confirmed it. The boathouse was officially listed on the State Historic Registry. A framed certificate arrived in the mail, along with a brass seal. I held it up to the light, heart pounding. Linda snapped a photo of me grinning like a fool. That weekend, the board held a ceremony. Kids waved little flags. A local news crew filmed, and the seal was affixed to the boathouse wall. Standing there, surrounded by clapping neighbours, I thought about how close we'd come to losing it all and how far we'd come since. But the fight had done more than save one building. It had rewritten who we were. Neighbours who used to barely nod now shared meals. People who once whispered complaints now spoke up. And most of all, we remembered what it meant to belong to each other, not just to a rule book. Walt summed it up best one night over a campfire. He leaned back, beer in hand, and said, "Funny thing is, Richard thought he was protecting property values. Turns out it was community that did the trick. I laughed. Yeah. Who knew kindness pays better dividends than fines? As spring melted into summer, the lake sparkled again. Kids swam, couples strolled, and families picnicked near the boathouse. A fresh set of initials appeared carved into the beam A+J. L'Ancien HOC. Instead of being angry, I smiled. Another story written onto ours. I sat there, coffee steaming, cedar creaking underfoot, and thought, this is how it was meant to be. So here's my question to you. What would you do if your HOA tried to erase your memories? Would you surrender them for the sake of aesthetics, or would you fight until the truth stood taller than any bylaw? Because me, I fought, and it saved more than a boathouse. It saved a community. Summer came back around 1 year after the fight truly began. The air was warm. The lake sparkled under the sun, and Maplewood Shores was alive with a spirit I hadn't seen in decades. Children squealed as they leapt from docks. Neighbours grilled burgers in backyards. And laughter rolled across the water like music. The board announced a brand new tradition, Community Heritage Weekend. It was to be held every June, honouring the history of the lake and the stories of the families who'd built it. People brought old photos, recipes passed down from grandparents, even tools used in building their homes. And, of course, the centrepiece was the boathouse. That Saturday, families gathered by the water. Booths displayed kilts, tackle boxes, and hand-carved paddles. The Peterson kids painted a mural on plywood, showing the lake in all four seasons. Evelyn sat proudly on one of the new benches, her cane tapping in rhythm to the music drifting from a fiddle. When the sun set, lanterns were lit along the shoreline. Everyone gathered by the boathouse, now shining with soft light, its red trim glowing like a heartbeat. Carla stepped forward with a smile. This building, she said, gesturing to the boathouse, reminds us that our homes are more than rules. They are memories, stitched into wood and stone, and when we stand together, no one can take that from us. She handed me the microphone. I looked at the faces, neighbours old and new, kids with painted cheeks, couples holding hands. My throat tightened, but I spoke. This isn't just the Grant Boathouse anymore. It's Maplewood's a symbol that when someone tries to bully us, when they tell us to erase our history, we don't bow. We stand, and when we stand together, we win. The applause echoed across the water. Some clapped, some cheered, some wiped away tears. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone on the dock. The moon floated silver above the lake, and the boathouse stood sturdy at my back. I traced the old carving in the Beam Grant family. 以前这把六是我, Dad. I whispered. We kept it safe, and it's going to outlast all of us. The boards creaked beneath me, steady and sure, as if the building itself agreed. Looking back, I realised something. Richard thought he was protecting property values, but what he didn't understand is that value isn't in matching mailboxes or manicured lawns. Value is in neighbours who shovel your driveway when you're sick. It's in kids catching their first fish off an old dock. It's in a boathouse that carries 70 years of laughter, tears, and love. He tried to take that away. And in fighting him, we found something stronger than we'd ever had before, a community that knows its worth. So I'll ask you, the same way I ask my neighbours. What would you do if your HOA demanded you erase your story if they threatened to fine you for your family's memories? Would you fold, or would you fight like we did until the storm passed? Until the truth stood taller than their rules? Because me, I fought, and now every morning when I walk out to the water, mug of coffee in hand, cedar creaking underfoot, I don't just see a boathouse, I see proof. Proof that bullies don't win when neighbours stand together. And I'll tell you this, if it ever happens again, if anyone tries to erase who we are, Maplewood Shores will be ready.